Hi, we're back with TrailCommand's AB60. I'm going to show you some of the upgraded clutch packs and maybe get a final assembly in here. As a footnote, here's our finished product on the valve body that we just did. So we like to get these done ahead of time, so once we put it in, we just have a valve body that's done to put in. It's a more organized way. We do our sub-assemblies, our pump, our drums, then everything's together. We put the whole trans together in one shot. So just as a brief note, we kind of got started. We have all this stuff down in the case. That's that center support that's real difficult to take out. Sometimes it's difficult to put back in. But production schedules dictated that we get started on this. Now here's a little tour around here. It's another AB60 that's washed up, ready to go back together. That's what we're working on currently. This is another valve body. And a lot of times on this, you'll see that this fluid is purple. And what that is, I believe, is UV dye that they put in at a factory level. So if you run into any kind of leaks in the future, it's easier to diagnose them. So what we're going to do is start with the C4 clutches. And if you guys are, any of you are trans builders, I know some trans builders watch our videos. This is a little reminiscent of a 4L60E or a 700, the assembly of this drum. So this is your coast clutches. These are your coast clutches, to be grammatically correct here. Now we put the sprag assembly in. And we put the C1 clutches in. So this is like a forward clutch. So it starts with like a cushion on the bottom and then alternating clutches and steels. So what we're using in this unit is going to be a green high energy material. That's what Ray Best is?
Yes, sir.
The Ray Bestis greens. A little impatient here. Here we go. You know, we've had this all together already. We know the clearance is right. So this is our forward and coast drum. So what we have next is our C2 frictions. So these go in the drum first. And this is interesting, like this unit, you could draw comparisons to a lot of other stuff that we've seen before back in the old days. You know, a transmission's kind of a transmission when you get down to it. Thinking of stuff like 6-speed autos back in the day was kind of outlandish. Like, you know, we really didn't think we'd see that. So we also have snap ring in here, right? That's the same as the first one we just put in. And this acts as a seat, right, for our next set of clutches, which is the C3 clutches. We can't put those in quite yet. Got to first put our drum in. We have this hub. And now we have this next hub, but if you look, it's got a little notches in it. So you got to put the hub in first, a steel plate, and then the first friction is going to sit down on top of this. And you have a bearing in here. Okay, so this next clutch set we've revised to get an extra friction plate in it. So again, these are going to be the green high energies. So getting some extra clutches in here really goes a long way, because this is typically one of the first things that fails in these units. On top we have a cushion, and that's not in all models. And then we have this top plate. And there's different thicknesses of these too, based on the setup at the factory. Now you'll also see there's a little notch here, and this corresponding notch right here. So when you put these in, you got to kind of push them till it sits in that spot. All right, so that's all done. Now I'll show you these. Not so great showing you putting it together. We have B2 clutch pack, which we've had revised parts made, and we have to do some machining here to get a little extra clearance. And this is real hard stuff to machine, so I don't do it here. I send this out because it just does nothing but chew up my tool bits. This is our B3 clutch pack, and this is responsible for making a 1-2 shift. And you can see these frictions are a lot different than the originals, and we get an extra one in. After that, we have a revised B1 clutch pack, which is the same. We get an extra friction in the B1. So those are all going to go in. These are it's called B1, it's called a brake. So in most transmissions, they call something a brake when it's splined to the case. The outside spline it to the case. When it comes on, it locks a component to the case. All right, so we have 3 brakes in this transmission, and then we have clutches. So a brake would be called B2, for example. A clutch would be called, C3 or whatever. So that's kind of how you tell the difference. Obviously, they're all clutches, but some of them are called clutch packs, or some of them are called clutches, and some of them are called brakes. And again, in case some of you guys didn't see the teardown video, this is some of what came out of here. I mean, this thing was torched for the most part. See all those burn marks on the steels, burnt clutches. A lot of bad mojo in here. Not only do we replace these with a better friction material, again, we could get more elements in that clutch pack in a lot of cases. But this is not what you want in your truck when you're driving around. If your stuff looks like this, you'll certainly be having codes like P7, P2714, and probably shift solenoid codes, and maybe even gear ratio errors when you have all this going on. Big Kenny's turn to jump in here. Nobody wants to wait to watch me put this thing together. All right, so that's a clutch drum and its housing. A return spring. or B2 clutch pack. B2, Ken?
Yes.
B2. Second brake. Most transmissions, your second brake is for second gear. But let's not split hairs here. Toyota calls the stuff what they want to call it. And some of this stuff's an afterthought because they came out with a 5-speed first, which is obviously a couple less clutch packs. So then they had to add some obscure names. Like, in other words, it's usually laid out. Like, the first clutch in a transmission will be your C1. Then the next one, front to back, would be a C2. And the same with the brakes. But Toyota threw all that out the window with this. Now this, we're working against spring tension. Right? So you have to kind of compress this and put the retaining spring in at the same time. Then you want to push to make sure it's all seated in there.
C1 clutch push.
Okay, so it's another clutch drum. And as I touched on before, to get 6 speeds, this transmission has way more components in it than you would technically need to do that. You know, you have plenty of transmissions that are 8 speeds at this point that have quite a few less parts in them. And the other thing, if you guys own Toyotas, you know Toyota's pretty proud of their parts. And anything you buy is pretty punishing. Like, we do a lot of stuff like BMW, Audi, Mercedes, and the Toyota parts are more expensive than what you consider all these high-end manufacturers. And again, it's the same thing. This has to be compressed as it's installed. In the comments, people could tell me if they'd rather see Ken do this stuff than me. Seems to go a little faster.
Coming around.
Coming around. See, a lot of guys have transmission videos on YouTube, and they just take the whole thing apart and put it together in front of a tripod. And, well, that seems like a nice way to do it. I think you kind of miss a lot that you really can't see. Now we have a bunch more stuff to go in. One sun gear. A planetary. Okay, and this is like a double ring gear. One side of it is for one planetary and the other side is for another planetary, which is kind of unusual. You don't see this in too many different transmissions. So you kind of air check them to make sure it's in. It's like, in other words, if it's not splined and all that, those clutches, when you air check it, you'll see that whole ring gear jump up. And as you can see, this is a bit of a pain in the ass. And I have a lot of people asking, you know, I want to build my transmission myself, and they've never worked on a transmission. Now, you got to remember is we're doing this a long time. I'm at 35 years, and Ken's what, almost 45 years rebuilding transmissions.
Yeah.
And sometimes this stuff still ain't so easy. Not a do-it-yourself project, in my opinion.
Gonna line up that hole with your slots so you're
Right. Right. Just you want to show that again, and with the washer, I guess.
the
Here's a-
washer's got 4 tabs on it, which got to go into these holes when it sits down. But
So this hole is going to accommodate that part of the washer that's sticking through this clutch hub. Now some guys, they put a mark too when you take it apart. You know, you kind of could mark the planetary to that hub to show you where it goes, but kind of not that difficult. We're B1 frictions next. Frictions and seals, rather. Clutch pack, we'll call it. Brake, we'll call it. Or B1 brake. A one-way clutch.
and she's home.
So we'll try and get a look. You see how these tabs have engaged into that aluminum clutch drum? All right, so that effectively locks everything to the case, right, when that sprag is engaged. Now we have a bevel snap ring that goes in here. Flat side of the snap ring faces back. And this is something you kind of want to tap in. Okay, yet another one-way clutch. Okay, in a normal rebuild, you're not going to have two components on the bottom. That's kind of part of our stack up that we have to use to get extra frictions in there. And this makes a big difference. And as far as any transmission I've ever taken apart that's come in here, none of the other performance builders, if there even is any, there's some that claim to be, have any kind of extra clutches in here at all. And even the valve body work, kind of a, what do we call it, Pumarooch. You know, there's a lot of caveman stuff, like people making metal accumulator pistons so they could block them, etc., etc. And now we're going to put the input drum in. I'm going to go off topic for a second to show you guys something. Is that all right with you, Ken?
Absolutely.
So this is something you don't necessarily have to do, but in certain circumstances, it's going to tell you if your assembly is right. Like just checking end play will work, but I want to show you how to use an H gauge because they're pretty useful in certain situations. All right, guys, so this is an H gauge. So we put this on the pump surface, and we can drop that little rod down till it contacts the bearing. Now you want to make sure all your screws are tightened up. So now what we can do is this gives us the ability to transpose this measurement to down here. Right, so as you see, we can see that we have a little clearance in there. You know, we're going to do a final end play check, but this ensures that the trans is assembled. There's not any clutches sticking up. You know, you have proper assembly. We might have to fine tune it, but usually you don't have to mess with end play too much on these. So H gauge. So we're going to put some studs in here, which helps get a pump down more evenly. And the pump bolts on these need silicone on them, or they're going to leak on you. Okay. And unlike a lot of pump O-rings, these kind of get crushed between the pump and the case. It's not like they sit on the outside diameter of the pump and seal that way. So this is more of a crush fit. Again, all these pump bolts need silicone. Now these get torqued down to 20 foot-pounds. Make sure it turns freely. All right, so this is about it for now. We're going to probably do another part, put the bell housing on, the valve body, and finish up the rest of the stuff. Please like, share, subscribe, and hit the notification bell.